Yes, I have an employee that has not reported for work today, and highly unlike her. I've tried calling her home number, I've tried calling cell phone, and can't get a hold of her. What can we do about that? Can somebody go by and check on them?
I had absolutely no idea what I was walking into. I saw hands, not connected to a body. I went in the master bathroom, and the only thing I saw were 2 tubs with what appeared to be body parts liquefying.
Get killing knives, quick, multiple. Get carving knives to make small pieces. Get sledgehammer, crush bones. Bring blender and food grinder, grind meat.
The killer put Lisa's body parts one, and he put Joel Sr.'s in the other. And then he covered them with a corrosive substance and left them there to liquefy into some sort of diabolical stew of human remains.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Joel Michael Guy, guilty.
My name is Angela Crane, and Joel and Lisa Guy were my parents. I wasn't prepared to speak today. It's like for 4 years, I felt like I've pushed it down, like it's not actually happening. But it's real. They're gone. And Dad was my best friend. And I'll never get to hear his laugh again.
I mourn for my dad, and know I keep talking about Lisa. I mourn terribly for my dad, I do. But I grieve and rage for Lisa. I rage for her from the mother's point of view. I cry for her because I wonder if when she realized the love of her life, the only son she had, the child that she gave her entire life to, was about to murder her, I wonder if at that moment when her heart was broken, did she even fight?
On November 28, 2016, West Knox County, Tennessee deputies were dispatched to a standard welfare check. A woman by the name of Jennifer Whitehead, an accounting manager with Jacobs Engineering in Oak Ridge, called to report that one of her employees had not shown up to work. Lisa Guy, 55, was an ideal and beloved employee, and it was unlike her not to call or not show up, especially since there was a retirement lunch with coworkers scheduled for her that day. Having been a homemaker for most of her life, Lisa had gotten a job in the accounting department of Jacobs Engineering in order to make a little side money so she could financially assist her 28-year-old son, Joel. Lisa's husband was Joel Guy Sr., and they had been happily married for 31 years. Jennifer had tried to call Lisa numerous times but received no answer. She said a bad feeling had come over her and she knew that something was gravely wrong. Knox County Sheriff's Office Detective Jeremy McCord was one of the first deputies who was dispatched to the welfare check. When they arrived at Lisa and Joel Sr.'s home, they saw both of their vehicles parked in the driveway. After he peeked through glass panes on the front door, he saw groceries and grocery bags strewn all over the foyer area. He walked around the house. The back door to the home was missing its doorknob, and he noted a, quote, really odd chemical smell. He described what he encountered when he walked inside the Golden View Lane home. Quote, it was the most horrific thing I've ever encountered in police work in my life. They showed up to the front door, and no answer, no knock. Both cars are parked in the driveway. Watching the trial, he says that usually that's not a good sign. So what happened to Guy Sr. and Lisa? On September 28th, just a week ago, the trial began for their son, Joel Guy Jr. The prosecutor, Leslie Nocios, laid out the state's theory. Joel Guy Jr. murdered his parents for money. Are we sure that no one else could have killed Lisa and Guy Sr.? How could a son kill his parents like that? Well, in a major bombshell, Jr. had planned the entire thing in a notebook, gory detail by gory detail. Investigators found the notebook in the bedroom he was staying in at his parents' house. So that kind of takes away the whole, quote, it was not premeditated defense.
Or any type of self-defense that he could come up with.
No, seriously, because the defense in the opening day on the 28th, the defense had literally more or less opened with, well, thanks for being here. They had nothing. At first, they tried to say, well, it's not necessarily his notebook, but then there was a handwriting expert who quickly debunked that attempt. So at that point, it was just kind of, well, thanks for being here. We're just going to sit down and have this go to trial. The state wasn't seeking the death penalty or offering him a plea deal for admitting it. They were seeking life with a chance of parole after 51 years. Times 2, so he never would have seen the light of day to begin with.
He's so sick that he wanted the death penalty.
He did actually request the death penalty. Initially, at the beginning of the trial, he said he didn't even want a lawyer. He just flat out requested the death penalty. But the state just said, nope, we're not seeking it.
I wonder if he's going to be one of those people that commit suicide while he is in jail.
I would say he would be at a high risk. And in the state of Tennessee, a conviction on first-degree murder charges triggers automatic sentencing of life in prison for each count. So as far as the prosecution was concerned, this is pretty much like an open and shut case. This entire trial, because of the gruesomeness and just heinousness of this crime, most of the trial was just introduction of evidence. There were 27 witnesses called.
And a video, too. Many videos.
A handful of, we had chest cam videos from the initial welfare check. We had videos from CCTV footage of Walmart gas stations. I mean, it was vast. And because the crime scene was the home, the crime scene itself spanned both floors of the home. It wasn't just isolated to one particular room. So this was a massive case in terms of just sheer physical evidence. All of this transpired around Thanksgiving. And here's the thing about this particular case. I don't recall it happening originally. I have never even heard of this case until it popped up this last week. And I watched the whole trial, all 5 days of the trial, start to finish.
It's a train wreck.
It's so awful.
And sad.
It's so incredibly sad. So it all transpired around Thanksgiving. And family members who testified at the trial reported that they were a very close-knit family. Well, I should say everyone else was close-knit except for Joel Jr. He was completely self-isolating. He didn't get along with his siblings. They never spoke outside of family gatherings. Like, one of his sisters said that she only spoke to him at holidays. The entire family came together for Thanksgiving. Everyone testified that he was acting very odd at Thanksgiving dinner. He was more talkative than usual. He was playing with his nephews, engaging with his siblings. He even started trying to give some of his childhood toys to his nephews.
You know something is wrong when someone who's not normal starts acting normal.
Right. Lisa and Guy Sr. have been paying for Guy Jr.'s way his entire life. He had taken courses at Louisiana State University for 9 years.
What was his major, do you know?
He said that he wanted to be a plastic surgeon, but he would not consistently go to school. In multiple interviews with his roommate at his apartment in Baton Rouge, his roommate said that he would stay sometimes days at a time in his room on the computer. And you know good things were not happening in that room.
God, no.
He couldn't or wouldn't hold jobs. He'd never actually had a single job in his entire life, except for multiple unpaid internships, which usually ended pretty quickly. His parents just always paid his way. What pushed this all into motion is that they were planning to redo the will and remove Joel Jr. from it entirely. They were planning to cut him off. And Robin White, Joel Guy's senior sister, testified that Joel and Lisa had told her that they were retiring, selling their house, moving into their dream home, and cutting Joel Jr. off financially as a whole. And they planned to do this at Christmas when the whole family was together. What's really sad is that Lisa was working for Jacobs, the engineering company. The only reason that she was even working was to give her whole paycheck to her son. They had no need for her to even work at all. They were actually very, very well-to-do family. She solely worked to support her child.
Because he wouldn't get a job?
Because he wouldn't get a job.
Wow.
Now, according to the prosecution, all of that is exactly why he killed his parents. Somehow, before Thanksgiving, he had gotten wind of their plan and decided to brutally murder them. And when we say brutal, that's putting it lightly. According to prosecutors at the trial, this particular crime scene was in the rarest of rare categories for crime scenes in terms of how graphic it was. So what exactly happened that day? Saturday after Thanksgiving, Lisa Guy left the home to go to Walmart and PetSmart. She left Walmart at 12:18 p.m. after buying some groceries. Later on CCTV, Joel Jr. was also at the same Walmart around 3:35 p.m. buying knives and chemicals that he would later use to dissolve the bones. While Lisa was at PetSmart, Joel returned home, and he attacked his father first. Joel Guy Sr. was stabbed over 42 times and had multiple defensive wounds. He was stabbed so viciously that there were 12 marks on his ribs, ranging from scratches to completely severing them. There was sharp force trauma to his lungs, liver, and kidneys. A wound to his shoulder was so severe that a fragment of the knife actually broke down deep within his muscle tissue.
Ooh.
Joel Sr.'s hands were severed at the wrist. His arms were severed from his body at the shoulder blade. His legs were removed from the hip, and his right foot was removed from the ankle.
What kind of monster?
The prosecutor also said that there was a very fierce struggle and that he definitely fought for his life. After he was murdered, his clothes were removed and placed into a bloody pile. Somewhere around here is when prosecutors and investigators believe that Lisa Guy came home. She came home at some point after he was killed, and she was carrying her Walmart groceries in through the foyer, and they believe that this is where and when she was murdered. Blood evidence actually points to her having been murdered on the stairs, as there was considerable blood splatter and perishable groceries were strewn all around the foyer. That's one of the first instances on that welfare check where investigators knew that something wasn't quite right, because he said that he saw milk and like breakfast meat, breakfast sausage laying in the foyer.
Oh, like complete
complete perishables.
Oh God, I bet that smelled great too.
Joel Jr. attacked his mother. Lisa was stabbed 31 times, and of those 31 wounds, there were 21 severe injuries. The attack severed 9 of her ribs, and there were several stab wounds to her butt.
What?
He cut her clothes from her body after she was murdered, and that clothing was also left in a pile. Her legs were severed below the knee, her arms were severed at the shoulder, her head was removed from her spine after a considerable amount of blunt force trauma was applied to her neck. With both of his parents dead, Joel Guy Jr. then started chopping up the bodies for disposal. Lisa Guy's severed head was found in a pot of boiling liquid on the kitchen stove. Joel Guy Sr.'s severed hands were found upstairs on the floor of their bedroom. The couple's severed torsos and remaining limbs were in 2 45-gallon tubs covered with corrosive substance and left to liquefy. Guy Jr. had attempted to use hydrogen peroxide and various other drain cleaners in order to, what his notebook referred to as, wash away the DNA evidence. He had also hooked up a hose to the master bedroom shower and was using other chemicals to try to speed up decomposition. Dr. Amy Hawes, who performed autopsies on both Lisa and Guy Sr. while working for the Regional Forensic Center, testified that the couple likely died within a few seconds to a few minutes.
Not to mention that I was really worried about how slow their death would be, especially with stab wounds, you know? And we've heard a lot of, well, there's a lot of instances where there's terrorist attacks with stabbings.
Yep.
And it takes a lot. It takes a lot to kill somebody. There's a lot of survivor stories of people being almost stabbed to death, right? Where people have like survived 65 stab wounds.
Yeah, it's crazy how much a human body can actually handle.
In this instance, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful they didn't survive very long to have to suffer.
I mean, it's just so heinous on so many levels, but if that gives you any indication of just how vicious and hate-filled this attack was.
He was very motivated, and it's disgusting. Who could kill their parents?
It's so vile. You know, we have like the Menendez brothers and so many other cases. People shoot their parents, you know, an argument, whatever. This was a very, 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 very personal attack.
Beyond personal, this goes into a very deep set of mental illness that was completely overlooked by probably his parents and the rest of his family, because they're basically saying in this story that he was weird by being normal at Thanksgiving.
Right.
Okay, if that doesn't tell you something has been ignored his whole life, and everyone's like, we never saw this coming, and then it came and it happened, and now there's dead people. You know, I think that the public needs to be a little bit more aware of the signs. I feel so bad.
Even his siblings said he was not normal. He didn't look normal. He didn't act normal. His roommate from Louisiana State University, they went to high school together. They had known each other for almost 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And he had never once met Guy Sr., his dad.
What?
He had only met Lisa, his mother, one time. After being best friends
From
high school. For 15 years. He'd never met his dad ever. In fact, what's extra fucked up is that he didn't even know that he had siblings.
What?
Yeah, his best friend of 15 years didn't even know that he had siblings.
You know what's really sick is that they pulled the search history off his computer too, and it was all about how he could dispose of his parents' bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy was obsessed.